Hello and welcome. My name is Kari Barclay. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the San Francisco Mime Troupe. Welcome to Democracy and the Digital, a panel with the Mime Troupe. I want to give a huge thank you to the San Francisco Public Library for hosting us. It's wonderful to be part of this series. This is our 8th episode in a 9-episode series that the Mime Troupe is doing this summer called Tales of the Resistance. The Mime Troupe is a Tony Award-winning activist theater group based in the Bay, and usually in the summer you'll find us performing in public parks entirely for free, putting on political musical comedies. This summer, because of COVID, we want to protect you all, so we're doing theater from the safety of our homes, and I've created a series of 9 radio plays that are finishing up on October 31st. And so today we are talking about our 8th episode, Dimension 2020, which particularly deals with the role of technology in society, as well as its influence on elections and electoral processes, something very relevant for the coming weeks. And to discuss that, we have a great series of panelists with us. Before I introduce them, I'd like to acknowledge that the Mime Troupe studio is on Ohlone lands and the San Francisco Public Library as well. And I welcome you all on YouTube to go ahead and comment in the chat the indigenous land that you are coming from, and to tie our struggle, tie our making to the cause of bringing indigenous sovereignty into power around the country. So thank you so much for that. Without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists. We have from the Mime Troupe, Amos Glick, who has been a mime trooper for the past, for over 10 years, is zooming in today from LA to join us, and has done work in improvisation, comedy, physical theater, many of the staples that the Mime Troupe has. So welcome, Amos. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a second. Yeah, actually right now, it'd be great if you can go ahead and tell us your name, tell us how you got involved with the Mime Troupe, and a habit or hobby that you've picked up over the course of COVID.
Well, I'm Amos Glick. I first read about the Mime Troupe in a college theater of history of theater book. And after I graduated, decided that because I wanted to do political theater and because I loved the Grateful Dead, that the Bay Area would probably be a good place for me to go, having read about the Mime Troupe and other companies in the area. And I first got involved right back then in 1990, right when I graduated from college. I've been away from the Mime Troupe for some time, since 2007. And have been in touch with them, obviously, and was involved in the 60th anniversary, but got sucked back in to be the announcer for the radio series. So that's how I'm back again after an absence. But overall, I was with the Mime Troupe for 16 or 17 years.
Great, thanks so much. And a habit or hobby?
Oh,
very important.
Since I mentioned the Grateful Dead generously started streaming on Friday nights, and Dead and Company, a spinoff group, on Saturday nights, live shows from over the years. And I started to watch them while I would text or FaceTime or even Zoom with friends all over the United States. And that it hasn't continued as a weekly thing, but from the get-go, it was weekly. And it was a really great distraction and a way to look forward to something during the week, as I was going through the very initial part where I lost all my work and was feeling insecure and scared for my family and all sorts of things that we were all feeling. And that was a great anchor to have.
That's great. I love that. Like, we need sources of regularity, and I think art can be that so many times. So
absolutely.
Thanks so much for that. I would like to introduce next Vahid Razavi, founder of Ethics in Tech, Silicon Valley veteran, and author of 2 books, including Ethics in Tech and Lack Thereof. Welcome, Vahid.
Thank you so much, Kari. It's a pleasure to be on. Love this SF Mime Troops. Had a chance to hit the road with you guys on a couple of events back in 2013 time frame. And then after that, I had a pretty bad lawsuit in the tech sector and ended up trying to commit suicide and survived it, and worked for Amazon Web Services for a short while and started Ethics in Tech. So pretty excited to be on your show and looking forward to your questions.
Thanks so much. We're really glad to have you. And for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Ethics in Tech as an organization? And then we want to hear from you a habit that you've picked up over the course of COVID.
Well, I'll start with the habit. I used to wear glasses. Now they all get fogged in when I wear the mask. So I hope my eyes are improving or I'm not seeing much when I drive because I'm not putting on the glasses. May not be the safest thing, and should probably not admit that on TV. But on a serious note, I moved down from San Francisco to the peninsula, and I'm closer to family. And at times like this, where you have so much uncertainty, just having family around is a huge blessing. So in that sense, even COVID can bring people to get closer together. And I was going to recommend, before we jump in, we take a moment of silence for all the people that have died in this pandemic, the 220,000 Americans, the million plus international victims to this pandemic, the 8 million people that are hospitalized and have gotten COVID to various degree, to the people that are suffering in the wars that are caused currently in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, Afghanistan, that have to live with the tragedy of war during a pandemic with absolute poverty and no international aid. I want to take a moment of silence for all the people that live under embargoes, let it be in Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and highlight that, because even though that's not necessarily ethics, it's something that we as humans need to acknowledge. So please take a moment of silence.
It's a great idea, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reminder. Yeah, I think even as we're doing musical comedy, it's important to remember that there's so many challenges in this world right now. And this is a time the Mime Troupe is tackles some of these questions through levity, but they really are life or death for so many people out there. So
yeah, let me tell you a little about Ethics in Tech.
Yeah.
We started off in 2013 when Edward Snowden came out with its revelations against NSA mass surveillance program. We thought a great way to educate the public was to organize comedy shows. I was smart enough or dumb enough to buy the domain nsacomedy.com. And then, of course, with the help of comedians such as Will Durst, we held events, brought comedians, people that were sued by the NSA, people that sued the NSA together on panels to discuss the topic. It turned out to be a great set of events. We mixed it with comedy because a lot of the events we ended up covering later on were darker in topic. We covered, for example, the US drone program and its impact on both the soldiers that launched the drones and the people that are on the receiving end of these drones. We launched a partnership with Campaign to Stop Killer Robots to talk about autonomous weapons and the harm that that will be doing for society and for humanity, and why we need to walk away from these weapons. We held Hiroshima Day, honoring the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima. At the same time, we hold events focused on privacy with Electronic Frontier Alliance, and Electronic Frontier Foundation has participated in some of those events and spoken at them. We've had the pleasure of working with Internet Archive, and they lend us their library on occasion for hosting events live. And our goal has been to, produce content, content that people will see and create some awareness around issues that are dark, that they may not necessarily gravitate to, but hopefully with a little bit of comedy, they'll tolerate us.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I think comedy can be a great conversation starter. And to start off our conversation with some comedy, I'm going to share with us a little excerpt from the Mime Troupe's episode of this week that then we can go on to talk about, use that to begin our conversation. So this portion of the radio play that you're about to hear is a conversation between a software creator and a founder named Chip Bonzo, who's the founder of Jamazon.com. Any resemblance to another company, entirely fictional. And this software promises to read people's minds and tell them what they really want. I think that'll give us enough context to get us started right into here. I'll go ahead and share us some sound. Oh, if I could get sound sharing capability, please. Folks from the library. That'd be great. There we are. Excellent. Here we go.
Why did you want this meeting?
Why would any woman want to have dinner with a great man?
The appetizers?
To be part of his greatness and to help him be even greater.
Chip Bonzo already has all the greatness he needs.
But can you get respect?
Chip Bonzo tried ordering respect from Jamazon, but all Chip Bonzo received were albums by Aretha Franklin.
Well, I know how you can get respect from your workers, from the press, from the world.
Tell Chip Bonzo.
Let the Jamazon employees vote on joining the union.
Never! If the workers at Jamazon unionize, they might get better pay, better benefits, and Chip Bonzo might go from being the richest man in the world to, like, the second richest man in the world.
I didn't say let them join. I said let them vote.
Vote, but not join?
Yes.
You have lost, Chip Bonzo.
What if I told you there was a software that would allow your workers to vote for what they really wanted, based on who they really are?
Who are they?
Scared peasants, always afraid, trained to believe that the worst thing for the workers is the workers united. And I've got a bit of software that can help them vote the way their fear tells them to.
Chip Bonzo is intrigued.
All you have to do is make it a requirement that Jamazon employees install it on their phones. Tell them you're beta testing it. Then tell the union that in-person voting is impossible right now.
COVID-19.
That mail-in ballots take too long.
Days, months, years.
And that automatic electronic voting is the way of the future.
Chip Bonzo is impressed and delighted and more than slightly aroused.
Why, Mr. Bonzo.
Call me Chip.
Chip.
Bonzo, but what do you get out of this?
Let's just say it's a proof of concept. Just get the software on those phones and then, maybe later...
Yes?
We can both go a little bonzo.
All right, I will stop us there. I'd love to hear some responses to this, reactions to it. And if you need a starting point as well, this is sort of asking whether technology, particularly potentially social media, is able to allow us to connect to our values, to tell us what we really want. And I'm curious, any responses to that? Do you think that technology can connect us to what our true values actually are? And let's go ahead and start with Vahid.
Oh, great. You know what, in terms of our values, the technology that's being developed, it's meant to be addictive. It's meant to be repetitive to show you what content that you want to see so that you can engage more with it. It's not really meant with the intent of educating you, or the platform has got the best interest of the public or the society in mind. What they're interested in is refeeding content over and over again that it can make the applications and the platforms like Facebook and the rest addictive to the average user. And in that, they're very successful. But unfortunately, through that, they create divisions in society. And those divisions are further highlighted, as we have seen in these past few years, by some of these applications and the power that they have over the kind of content they can promote and in what feeds. If they take some of these algorithms out, people would be better off. You know, I think they overcode. Amos?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's no AI that I'm know of that can, educate me about my values. I think the sort of coding that goes on seems to be more about how they can make money off of us by seeing what we click on, or some people even think hearing what we talk about. I'm hearing more and more friends saying that they've had private conversations, not while they're browsing, and then the next day or hours later, they're getting all these advertisements for stuff that only came up in those conversations. And so in that way, they can be predictive to say, oh, you might want to buy this because you talked about it. But I think it's our reaction to the technology, which we wouldn't have without the technology, that sort of clues us in or reminds us of what our values are. I know that's true for me. I hate advertising with a passion. And so like I spend a lot of time clicking on getting rid of ads from my Facebook feed so that they won't give me more stuff like that. I know it's totally a moot cause. It's not worth doing it, but it sort of underscores my reaction to that kind of invasion into my world. And yet I openly engage in it. So it's kind of a weird paradigm, but I'm more interested. I mean, I don't really believe that advertising affects me that much because I try to ignore it. And I think if there's all this weird surreptitious stuff happening with certain types of algorithms aimed at me and what I might purchase or what I might think, I think it's my abject response to it that sort of underscores what my values are and reminds me what I care about, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, both of those are great contributions. And yeah, I think we learn about technology. We learn about our values through talking about how we want to use technology, right? If technology in its current form, like you both were saying, it's trying to get our attention. And since this is San Francisco Public Library and they love when I do a shout out to books, I really recommend Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. And she's an artist who talks about how tech essentially, the algorithms, try to get our attention for us to keep looking, to keep generating ad revenue. And it creates often very extreme content that's going to get us to have emotional responses, which isn't necessarily content we value, but it's content that we want to look at or that we're tempted to look at. So I think there's a lot to say there about what technology could look like in a more democratic way, which again is the kind of other topic at play here in this conversation. I'm curious, I'd like to ask you, Vahid, to kind of build on that, whether, if you think there are some positive steps that the tech industry can take to become more democratic or to be advancing democracy in this time.
Yeah, honestly, I think when you talk about the tech industry, it's really the workers and the billionaire class that run them and a bunch of middle managers. But you need to divide up the class in order to analyze it, I think. So you have people that are working in rideshare and delivery, and they're considered tech workers and economy workers of the new economy. Then you have the people that work in these warehouses that are getting paid for hourly labor. Then you have mid-level managers, contractors, and what have you. If you approach all of them and say, would you like to unionize? Would you like to see unionization? A lot of the mid-level managers will say no, but that doesn't mean that the people in the warehouses would be against it. There's a site called Former Employees of Amazon, .com, and they basically cover all these folks' story that have worked in Amazon in various capacity, and you can hear their stories. And a lot of it is, unfortunately, sad to see that a company with so much wealth, so much power, doesn't do its part.
This sort of builds on to a further question I have, which is where have you seen the voices of moral conscience coming from within tech companies? I know there have been like campaigns at Google, at Amazon, things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, the Project Maven campaign that Google had, and Google engineers got up and they said that we don't want to work on defense industry projects. That was notable. And you got to realize that a lot of the engineers that are working at places like Google and Microsoft and the rest are refugees or first-time immigrants from other countries themselves. They're Indians, they're Iranians, they're Middle Easterns, there might be, Europeans that are there. And they don't want to see another war. They don't want to be working in the industry that creates these kinds of weapons and tools and autonomous powers. So you have every right to protest against it. When you see the effects of climate change and companies like Amazon and the employees come out and protest in Rove, protesting against Jeff Bezos's policy, that's admirable, and we need more of that. I think we need to hold these companies to a high standard. Amazon claims it has high standard, but what are those standards? It destroys Earth, it destroys the environment, it produces a ton of goods that go back into the waste basket of Mother Earth. And at the same time, somebody like Jeff Bezos makes a climate pledge of $10 billion and hasn't paid a penny towards it. So we got to hold these billionaires accountable, and we got to provide resources to organizations that want to unionize and people that want to unionize within these tech companies. And if they don't, that's fine too, but at least they have had the option.
Thank you. Yeah, earlier this summer, as part of one of our other panels, we had drivers from Rideshare Drivers United, which has been trying to unionize Lyft and Uber drivers, which during the pandemic has been very important because they've been wanting safe working conditions, things like that. And recognizing that they are tech workers too, because they're working for companies that are integrated in tech, and they hold the power. Like, these companies cannot work, they cannot operate without their workers. So
very true.
Yeah, I think it's a really thoughtful insight to actually do a class analysis within each company is really thoughtful. Amos, I want to bring you in here, speaking from the perspective of folks who've been artists who you've witnessed around you and your response as an artist to the elections coming up, and sort of how have people who've been working in the arts seen their how did they see the election impacting their livelihoods, and what have artists done in response, or perhaps from your own experience in particular?
Well, it's a little bit, it's almost a weird time to ask that question, because I've been living in my own little apartment bubble. I'm not out at the improv theater networking and getting drinks with my fellow improvisers, and I'm not going to auditions and seeing the people that I know and chit-chatting with them before and after audition. But I'm very aware, at least in my circle, and especially I'll mention my LA friends, which would be mostly around improvisation, specifically improv theater. That community seems to be very engaged politically, and even before the election, but certainly now during the election, it's almost like if you're not posting in the community group about some action you're taking to get the vote out in swing states, you're not really paying attention and you're not with it. And I like that peer pressure because I'm totally down with it. So I think, those of us who are artists, we're all working on our own projects, and a lot of us are doing projects around the pandemic or the election. I made a little pandemic parody music video, which did not treat Trump too well at the very beginning. But artists are doers. We make stuff. That's what we're trained to do. And when we're not doing that, we've got to make something. At least the best of us, or the most engaged of us, are. And I think you're if you were to poll a bunch of artists right now, especially in urban environments in the cities where actors and musicians are not working as much, my guess would be that a lot of those people are spending some of their extra time getting involved in this on the front lines, as far as making calls, writing letters. A musician friend of mine in Oakland who runs the what's this thing called? Gosh darn it. He used to be a lyricist for the Mime Troupe, Ira Marlowe. What's his theater called?
Oh,
Monkey House. He's in Reno, Nevada right now with another musician, and they're going door to door during the pandemic. And these are musicians. He's someone who's fully invested in an artistic career. He's taking his downtime and he's going out of state and putting himself in danger to get involved in the election. And by and large, I'm finding that most people I know are doing whatever they can involved in this election, especially. And I think because, look, they're all people who were politically active before, but my guess is, and my sense is that with their downtime, they're doubling down and putting their money where their mouth is, and being probably way more activists than they would be in their normal lives. That's just my sense from my community.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like a lot of artists' livelihoods are kind of at stake in the elections. Like the sooner that we're able to come up with a manageable approach to the pandemic, the sooner that we'll get to experience more forms of in real life art and all. Yeah.
I'll just add on to that technology wise, like, the example that comes to mind, but I mean, any of the technologies I think apply, but especially TikTok, which I don't really engage in because I'm done layering on the technologies. I don't need another social network to deal with. But my understanding of it is that it's essentially performative in nature. And I'm hearing a lot in the news and on the internet about people who are commandeering certain events and stuff like that, like buying up tickets to Trump's events. And those are the Korean music boys.
Oh, K-pop.
Yeah, K-pop boys somehow mobilized a bunch of K-pop fans to buy up a bunch of tickets to one of Trump's events so that they could have the event be only half full. Stuff like that. And so if TikTok is truly performative, like I've heard it's like Vine, and I've seen a little bit, then I think that's a way you'll see artists getting engaged, is creating content around the election and trying to motivate people in an entertaining way, like the Mime Troupe, through that very specific technology.
And on that note about like what art can do, I'm curious why ethics in text turned to comedy, and what you see as the uses of comedy in bringing up ethics in the world around us.
Yeah, I just think in a lot of ways, comedy is a great way of being able to state things sometimes that would not be politically correct, to get a message across that may not be favorable to powers that be. To limit liability from lawsuits, potentially. So for all those reasons, comedy is a good tool. And besides, when you talk about topics that are really serious and heavy in nature, you want to leave the event with a Hollywood ending of some sort, because that's just the way we are in America. And ending it with a positive note of comedy and hearing a guy like Will Durst, puts a huge smile on people's face. So that's what we try to do. We bring in also musicians. We're a huge fan of music, makes an impact. I think in art and technology can reflect each other nicely. They work together nicely. And that's why we're blessed to have these comedians involved. We actually take pride in our board of advisors. It's a very diverse board, from folks in the tech industry that have spent 15 years at Google to comedians like Will and Debbie Durst, as well as a reverend or a couple of reverends. So we have a very diverse set of folks represented on our board. I hope you guys can get a chance to go to ethicsintech.com and check it out and see the organization. We want to reflect the community. That's really important for us.
That's great. And I think that what you were saying about comedy leaving people with a sort of positive spin on things, or not totally demoralized when talking about some of these heavy topics, I think is so important. I'm really inspired by Boots Riley, who's a Bay Area musician with the Coop, and he wrote the film Sorry to Bother You that opened a few years back. He always says that art is very good about getting people aware of problems and like feeling despair, feeling frustrated, feeling like, oh gosh, there's so many things in the world. But art doesn't always tell us like where to go next or what actions to take. And I think when comedy leaves us feeling a sense of hope or feeling a sense of joy and community, or when you can do work with like the Mime Troupe that's partnering with the community, that's saying, okay, hey, here's what a show is about, but also go vote. Also think about unionization in your workplace. You're showing people potential paths to take, so that you don't emerge from art feeling like, wow, I just felt really bad. I've done my duty. Right? There's I like that there can be so much more to art than that. Yeah, I wanted to jump next into yeah, speaking of things that can be done, I'd love to hear, Amos, I know you're doing work, you mentioned other artists doing work in swing states. Tell us about what you've been doing in Texas.
Well, I've barely started. I've signed up and had one training, but I'm not comfortable giving money to, the Democratic Party even. I just don't, the two-party system doesn't work for me, and the Democrats as a larger vision, their larger vision and what they do as an organization is not appealing to me. And so I don't want to give them money, even though I want them to beat Trump. So I really beat the internet and the rugs to find a way that I could do something impactful. And I found a group out of Texas called Rideshare to Vote. And their website is ridesharetovote.com. And as their name indicates, they provide rides to people in swing states specifically. So Texas, West Virginia, and North Carolina, I believe, are where their programs are. And my initial instinct was to be a driver. But of course, in LA and California, we don't really need, it's not a real need. So when I contacted them, they said they didn't have a program, and said, if you come to Texas, you can drive, or you can be a part of our dispatch team. So I'm going to be like a taxi dispatcher for early voting, for people dropping off. In Texas, they've only got one drop box per county. Their governor limited the amount of drop boxes that they could have to drop off mail-in votes. And it's just not fair to people who don't have easy transportation. So we'll be giving rides to anybody, but the orientation is around notifying people who are going to vote blue. And so that's where I felt like I could best put my energies. And so I threw them some money and then signed up for some shifts, or some potential shifts, to dispatch and also to phone bank for them. And their phone banking will also be in swing states to Democratic voters who haven't turned up recently and voted. So they have that information, are able to target specifically those communities, those people.
That's really awesome. And I think we were talking earlier about like what technology can do for the better. And I think if it's cool that you're in California and you're able to do that work in Texas entirely remotely. And I always come back to the attention. It's again, the being able to setting the terms of how you're using the technology rather than it operating vice versa. So that's really exciting.
Amos, that's very commendable. But as a 501c3, we cannot do anything in terms of electioneering or backing candidates or endorsements. So our big push has been to get out to vote and encouraging people to vote regardless who they're going to vote for.
Yeah.
And that's been our focus. But what you're doing is very commendable. And
well, these people, I don't know what their status is. I haven't looked up if they're a 501c3, but they will, anybody who calls them and asks for a ride to the polls, they're going to give it. They're not going to ask who you're voting for and whether you're red or blue. But their outreach is definitely to a progressive community. So that's the way in which they're activists. And I don't think that's a problem. And they're not telling anybody which way to vote. They're just facilitating people getting to the polls. They just happen to be letting, left-leaning people know more about it than others. But we all do what we have to do. I mean, if your organization prohibits you from the Mime Troupe can't specifically endorse a candidate either.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. So it creates an interesting kind of
But what was, I was during the Bush Cheney years, I was George Bush. And so I got to, even though we didn't say don't vote for him, it was so great to just, create the story that allowed you to understand what the perspective was.
Well, I think fundamentally, we have some deeper issues in this country in terms of the overall system. We can have elections every 2 years or 4 years and bring in a new politician endorsed by the latest advertisement from the favorite corporation to be in office, thanks to Citizen United. But in reality, what needs to happen is that we need to have a system where it's not the rich and the wealthy that benefit from socialism and the masses suffer under Hunger Games. That's what we have. It's the Hunger Games for the middle class and the low income, and sheer socialism for the rich. And they call it capitalism, but I don't believe in it. Why should companies in any industry, in banking, in Boeings of the world, the big players in the airline industry, why should they all get bailed out? At the end of the day, these companies should have had enough money to sustain themselves during rough times and had a viable business so that they wouldn't need a bailout. It's just that they've spent their money buying back their own stocks as opposed to investing it in what they need for their business. And therefore, they end up getting bailed out while the rest of the public doesn't. So that's what's unfair in this society, is that guys like Amazon, as in 3 years, pays zero in taxes. And while the secretary that works in that company pays, 20, 30% of his wages in taxes. Where's the fairness in that?
Yeah, and what's so interesting, and it's so obvious that because the system is rigged, that during the pandemic, when all the politicians are talking about that they want to, give more money to the American people, it's been so very clear how the individuals and small businesses have been screwed during this process of getting money to people, and much bigger companies are getting $1 million checks, and they shouldn't need it based on their profit margins, And some companies are doing very well right now. Very, very well.
If they're too big to fail, break them up. If they're not too big to fail, let them go bankrupt. Come out of bankruptcy court. We have a real process. It works for people. It should work for corporations.
Yeah, I think that's particularly important to think. So many of these tech companies and startups are like, they were hemorrhaging money. They aren't making a profit. They're disrupting without actually.
Because of investors, I can understand that. What I'm talking about is companies and airlines that are getting federal funding to sustain themselves, the banks. And I don't think that's right. Those are too big to fail. If they're too big to fail, they should be broken up. And if they're, if they can't sustain themselves, go bankrupt, let a bunch of new owners take over. Simple as that. That's capitalism.
Right. Yeah, you can bail out the workers rather than necessarily bailing out the company and the owners themselves. So I think there's so much to that. I'd love to open up the floor to audience questions. So please feel free to put some comments or questions in the chat. One thing that I would like to ask is how, in particular, just in terms of Vahid, in terms of what you've seen with the tech workers that you've encountered at comedy shows, things like that, or the folks who you're in touch with in your network these days, folks who are in the tech industry, how are they thinking about the elections in terms of what are tech workers like trying to get involved with get out the vote? What have you perceived kind of those around you? How are people thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as personal invitations in regards to get out to vote and what have you. I look at organizations like EFFs of the world organizing events. They just had their Pioneer Awards. And, at all of these nonprofits, we all want to make sure that people are encouraged to vote. It doesn't matter if in terms of nonprofits focused on the tech sector. In terms of the tech companies themselves, look at the way they're advertising. Uber and Lyft put $186 million ad budget for Prop 22. And in addition, have an ad on the face of their application. So every time you launch the app, you have to be subjugated to the ad of what the corporation stands for. That's kind of like every time you want to turn on your telephone, you have to get an ad in order to dial a number, or you get a box of cereal, you got to get an ad from XYZ company. That's just because, Cornflakes wants to enforce its political beliefs on you. They're going to go and send you a pro-corn flyer inside of it. So at the end of it, it's ridiculous that these companies are going to this extent to do electioneering around issues such as Prop 22. So, I can't talk about candidates, but I can definitely talk about propositions. We're against Proposition 24. We're against Proposition 22 in the state of California. And I think that relates to technology and tech workers.
Great. That's really helpful. Yeah, in California, we have so many of those propositions every year that it's great to hear the specific details. I'm getting a question here from YouTube. I'm interested in the technology of voting machines, if that's within the scope of the conversation. If there's no paper trail, just e-votes, which is the case in many countries, how do we know the results are legit? Is open source software achievable? Interesting. That's out of my element.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. It's not my domain of expertise. So one thing I know is if I'm ignorant about something, I shut up.
It's just so funny though that when there's paper, people talk about how unreliable the paper is. When there's submitted by email or a technology, that's suspect. When it's submitted by mail, it's like no matter what system we come up with, there's a way that someone is either going to say it's corruptible or actually corrupt it. But I guess time will tell. Yeah, and I don't know anything about it, so I'm not claiming. I just think it's funny that you go from hanging chads to the what was the name of that company, Diebold, the voting machine company that was supposedly corrupt, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, earlier this summer we had a speaker, Eric Rohrholm, who'd been involved in the Iowa caucuses this year, had the disastrous app that totally malfunctioned. Yeah. And I don't think it's a reason to be like, any election should use technology as they're able, if they're able to make it secure. But when I remember when that app went wrong, one of my friends was in a ride share in San Francisco, surrounded by tech workers, software engineers, who said, well, we could have come up with a better app to do that and programmed it and fixed it in this way. And I think that's the mindset that I'm kind of worried about, is like the idea that, again, that all technology around this has to come from above, and that democracy also means democracy in terms of how tech is developed. And so if we're thinking about how we want to integrate technology into elections, that should be both things that experts are offering their input on, but also things that we're discussing in forums like these. So
absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, you can't create technology that and the whole system is dependent on and uses for its election without doing the hard work. And it requires techies that are very interested in this topic and to engage with. But using open source software is just as achievable. You don't want to be a vendor-based solution that could be, the guy with the magic keys that has a backdoor access. Remember the old RSA and their backdoor to the NSA? You don't want stuff like that. You want to make sure it's actually secure. So the open source community is a great one to rely on.
Great. Do we have any other questions coming in the chat? In the meantime, one other question I have for Vahid is whether there's anything that's, oh, I see a question from the chat. I'll finish this one and then I'll get to this new one. Is what are some things that have surprised you since starting work with ethics in tech? Like some things that you didn't expect to encounter through your work, and things that you've found over the course of it.
Yeah, I've been so surprised on how pro and supportive people have been in our endeavor. It's amazing the kind of support that we get from masses of people that participate in these events, that speak at the events. They do it all pro bono. You know, the comedians get a small honorarium, but it's a very small amount, and unfortunately we don't not funded, but we're like you guys. We don't have any big corporate sponsors. We don't have anybody that's funding us outside of what we raise through events and through grassroots activity.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, the Mime Troupe does not, it doesn't get any corporate donations as well. So yeah, thank you. I'm seeing a further question here. Please explain your stance on Prop 24, if you can tell us a little bit more about what you mentioned earlier.
Sure. So Prop 24 does not do enough to advance the data privacy of California consumers. It's a mixed bag of partial steps backwards and forwards, includes some of the strengthening amendments urged by privacy it does not include some of the most strengthening amendments urged by privacy advocates. This I'm reading from Electronic Frontier Foundation. And when it comes to privacy matters, I trust the opinion of EFF. They have put a lot of effort in creating California privacy rights, and those are going to be weakened by Prop 24. And based on EFF's recommendation and what we have reviewed, we've decided to not endorse this proposition.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Amos, I'm curious around what your experience has been sort of making art in the times of in the times of pandemic, be it being the announcer for Tales of the Resistance, or you coordinating with other artists entirely through technology. How has that been for you?
Well, I haven't been supremely involved with the Tales of the Resistance. I just get some copy every week or every other week and do the voiceover for that. It's very minimal. So, you know, normally in a Mime Troupe show, you've got meetings, you talk about the themes and characters, and you really hammer out the ideas, and the writer obviously writes them up, and then you perform them. So I haven't been involved in that way, but, you know, I'm in LA now, and all my live theater and auditions stopped. So the first thing I did was create a music video, and it was great, but I did everything myself, and it's good to know that I have those skills and that it came out halfway decent, but I was lonely. More interesting is that I just finished, over the course of a month, I've finished about 15, 16 days on a television show that I can't talk about, and just how intense the protocols are around that, the multiple times a week that I'm tested, the social distancing, the health and safety personnel on set constantly reminding you to put your mask on, or to social distance and stuff like that. The different zones they have for different types of workers on a television set, you know, and the constant reminders that, you know, that you've got to pay attention to this. The way that you're seated on the rides when you go to and from set, you know, where you can sit. And it, you know, usually there's a lot of kibitzing that goes on sets at what they call the craft and services area, where there's basically snacks. It's like a little bar, and none of that, you know, there's a little bit of that, but not to the same extent. You're kind of in your trailer or you're working, and it's again, a little bit more lonely. But what I'm glad to see is that, at least in Hollywood, with the bigger productions, at least the one that I was on, that they're taking it extremely seriously. They want to work, so they're trying to keep it safe. that being said, I'm aware of a lot of other people who are involved in things like Zoom and Twitch and stuff like that. I'm somewhat involved in that. I've done a couple shows on Twitch, doing like improv game shows, and a lot of people out of the improv theater community are involved in this network called Outpost 13, which is a bunch of independent artists, and they've created a channel now for stuff. And that all sort of came to fruition right as the pandemic was happening. They were starting it beforehand, but people are finding those mediums now more engaging. I happen to not love it. I don't like doing improv on Zoom. I don't really like watching it on Zoom, but I'm glad that those who like watching it and like doing it are able to do it.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I've been curious to what degree Hollywood had been able to kind of resume production. So it's very interesting to hear about all those situations. And earlier this summer, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Some things like this one filmed all the stuff I was involved with, 100% filmed outdoors. So that made it that much easier. Nice. Some stuff has been started up and then got shut down.
Oh, wow.
There's a whole bunch of different things happening. And then there's non-union stuff, which I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. I mean,
gotcha.
Talk about, union work, Vahid. I mean, in that I feel really comfortable with the way that the union is, actually the union also helped me apply for unemployment too. There was a lot of resources for actors through the union with unemployment and stuff like that. So union strong, man.
Yes, yes. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear, are there any ways in which our audience can get involved with ethics in tech, or any events you've got coming up that you can share with us? Oh, you're muted right now.
Sure, be happy to. Check out our website for all our previous events and videos of all the recordings that we've done at various internet archives or online broadcasts. Please plan to attend our December 10th event for Human Rights Day. We're focusing on women empowerment and advancement in the tech sector and minorities in general. It's a long event. We'll publish the program for it, and we can choose which speaker you want to listen in on. And of course, we end the night with 4 amazing female comedians, including Annette Mulaney, I think Diana Amos, and Zahra Nurbakhsh. She was on United Shades of America on CNN. So we got some really good comedians, and it'll be a fun night, and we hope that you guys can make it.
That sounds great. To hear more about what the Mime Troupe is doing for the rest of the fall, you can see us at sfmt.org. We have all of our episodes there. Our past YouTube discussions are all on the San Francisco Public Library channel. We have a playlist of all of them. And 2 weeks from now on Halloween, October 31st, same time, same YouTube channel, we're doing a program to celebrate the end of Tales of the Resistance for now of the radio series. In which we'll have probably over 9 artists with the Mime Troupe all on board. It'll be a good chance to celebrate all the episodes and all that we've accomplished this summer into the fall. It's been quite a while that we've been doing this. So check out that work at sfmt.org, and you can catch us in another 2 weeks. Thank you, Amos. Thank you, Vahid. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I've learned a ton over the course of this conversation, and thank you as well to our viewers for joining us today.